recording. And
And real quickly, I do have a 3 o'clock hard stop with a meeting with the trustee. So I do not want to be rude. So I wanted to share that up front.
All right,
Okay.
thank you very much.
And like Mayor Lee, David, I'd like to thank you for meeting with us again. And we're going to be probably raising some difficult issues with you. We're all concerned about the layoffs and your recent letter about the proposal to lay off as many as 50 full-time faculty. The ones who are most hurt by this will be students who have no responsibility for what's been going on at the college. And the basis for the actions that you're taking is this, what you said is a $65 million structural deficit, which is kind of, your position is contrary to what the union's putting out. I'm not that familiar with their specifics. They're saying there is no need for more layoffs and that we can have a balanced budget. So the question that we have is, on what basis, or what's your source for the $65 million deficit that you're saying that the school has?
Well, thank you for the question, Rick. And I apologize if the campus communication wasn't clear. I believe what I intended to say is that the district has deficits spent in excess of 65 million since 17-18. So if we were to add up the annual deficit spending amounts over that time, it would equal to a number slightly above 65 million. So it's not 65 million in 1 year.
Sure.
It's 65 million over the course.
No, I understood it to be accumulated, but where do you get that number from?
Sure. So that number comes from the state chancellor's website, which holds all of our annual 311 reports. So you can go onto the state chancellor's website. You can look at City College of San Francisco's 2017-18 311 annual financial report. And then taking that data, looking at the beginning fund balances across all of our funds here at City College to start the 17-18 year, taking those balances and comparing them to our fund balances today, collectively, our fund balances across our operational funds have decreased to a tune of excess 65 million.
But then who's responsible for that information given to the state chancellor?
So that's information that's audited each year. Every district fills out the financial statements and submits them to the chancellor's office, and then they're audited and any adjustments are made. So the chancellor's office is just the repository of all of the district's annual financial statements.
Okay, I guess maybe Madeline would like to ask you about some issues related to that. So thanks for answering.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Madeline?
Well, just in terms of audit, as you all know, I know, the auditor gets where does the auditor get the information?
The district. So the district pulls information from our banner enterprise resource planning system, or ERP, and fills out the financial statement report. It's the same template that all of the districts use, and then we hand those those financial statements to our auditors, and they go through their external audit process.
Right. So we give the figures to the audit. It's our figures. I tried on a computer last night because there's in the, you asked me to look at the FCMAT letter from 2011, which I'm pouring through. And I thought, oh, good, I need to go back to some of the source. And I tried finding the audit that they base it on, the 2020. And it says access denied in the computer. So I would hope that somehow you can maybe make sure that the computer lets people look at these audits, because again, it's a snapshot, audits are, and I've followed 311s a lot. And the FCMAT report from 2016 doesn't seem to indicate this problem. In fact, it was really, I think I emailed to you, and I think I congratulated you because you were here at that time, that FCMAT letter showed no real problems. And it was quite laudatory. I hadn't seen it. That came from another source, because I am trying to figure out these sources. So I'm hoping that when I get something like, or anybody gets something like access denied on these kinds of very important, independent, but we give them the numbers, audits, that we can look into how those numbers actually are created. And my question is, which I asked yesterday, the criteria for the 50 cuts or the 50 layoffs, and then the budgets given to the departments were based on some data, and I'm wondering if I could get that data instead of the results, the actual, you know, how it got there. Is that possible?
Yes, that is possible, Madeline, and thank you for, bringing the concept up in regards to the data used for the decision on the determination of 50 March 15th notices. We are here, I believe, next week going to be meeting individually with each department chair to review and vet the data. And then ultimately that data will then be disseminated to anybody who may want to take a look at it. So that data will be available. We do want to have a chance just to touch base and look at it through a first pass with the department chairs, specifically of those departments who are impacted, just to make sure we are all collectively looking at the same data and have an understanding as to where it came from and the methodology being used. So that is something that will happen in the next week. And then ultimately that data will become broadly available once the department chairs have had a chance to take a first look at it.
Thank you, Dr.
Could I just say, however, that's backwards. The data should be observed before it becomes in place. I have had these meetings before with Tom Vogle's office, and this is exactly why I'm asking for the data now, going into the meeting. Because what I get is, here it is. And then I go, no, it's wrong. And then by the time it all figures out, it's too late. And I don't like that pattern. It's happened before in this district through Tom's office. And I would really like to have what he is dealing with first so that I can go into the meeting and not have it be a fait accompli, which is what he does. So it would be, I think, for all the departments involved, not just the 18 departments that are really affected, because bumping will affect everybody in the school. Decisions should be made up front with clean data, not, well, we might get around to fixing it, and it is never fixed. If I could make that
No,
statement.
and fair enough, Madeline. And I think you make a good point in wanting to provide information in advance so we can have meetings that everybody's prepared for. So let me reach out and see what the plan is in regards to setting up those meetings, because I do think having information disseminated in advance would make for a more productive discussion.
Right.
So I hear you.
Because they've given us advance and we have to meet on Monday, but already the advance doesn't make sense. And so it's in a catch-22. And we've been there before, and it's not good. It's not good planning. It's not good decision-making. The rhythm is off. The timing is wrong, to use musical terms. And definitely there's wrong notes all over the page. Okay.
All right, thank you, Madeline. I think Rick Baum has a question, a follow-up question.
Yeah, I want to follow up because the union AFT 2121 is saying there's no need to make cuts, that the budget can be balanced without making cuts. So I want to know why or how are they wrong? And then I'm concerned. If you're relying on Alameen for the figures that you're submitting and using right now, because we've been told repeatedly by the union that he grossly misrepresents things, he's not forthcoming with the information that they need, and that he basically even lies about the figures. And we hear this over and over again. So if you're relying on someone with that kind of credibility in the eyes of our union that represents us, it's very troubling. And these numbers get changed all the time. The union was saying at first during negotiations last year that the administration was claiming a $35 million deficit for the year. And then they said, well, we looked into it and it turned out to be 12 million. I mean, that makes a huge difference. And they're getting, not even full information because Alameen isn't providing them with it. So your promise is good that you're going to provide that for Madeline, but how can we count on that happening? So I guess my question is the union wrong? And if you're relying on Alameen, why should we, respect what he's been providing you with?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to respond to that, Rick. So in regards to the budget that was put out by our labor partners with AFT, ultimately, as I think we've discussed last time, I was not a part of the development of that budget, so I would not feel comfortably, nor would it be appropriate for me to speak on the numbers. But what I can share is that we have been, and these are budgets and numbers and projections that I am involved in, as well as other members of our budget and accounting team. We will have a campus-wide forum here in the next week, I believe February 17th, as well as several campus presentations here to have a discussion and to take a look at the budget projections that we're putting together that support the need for some structural changes in regards to our staffing. So I do hope that you are in this group, and I'd be more than happy to come and present to Heat at a upcoming meeting regarding the budget numbers that will be used for future decision making.
But my question is, and I'll be stopped because I'm asking too much. Why should we have it? Why should we believe anything that Alameen's giving us in terms of the numbers, given his track record in the 1 year that he's been here?
Sure. And to respond directly, I would say, and not to be indirect, Rick, is that ultimately part of the validation, the verification of financial numbers is the subsequent audit report. So to respond directly in regards to, well, how can anybody trust any of the financial information? It's ultimately reconciling the year-end data with the audited financial statements from the external auditor. So that is something that we can do. But as is mentioned, there's really, it's really becomes challenging when we start looking, 1 to 2 to 3 years out, because those types of discussions include assumptions that depend on economic factors, depend on state budgets. So in regards to the direct response as to how do we depend on future financial figures, it's really looking at the assumptions together and determining whether or not we think they're reasonable and recognizing that they are assumptions and subject to change.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Martin. I don't see any other hands right now, so Thomasita would like to ask a few questions of her own.
Well, of course, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Ohlone land, and I'd like to ask the Ohlone ancestors of this land to inspire all of us, especially Dr. Martin, to be the chancellor that he was at Monterey, and that's who we thought we were getting, and we thought we were getting a guy who would build the college and hire faculty and increase classes, and what we're getting doesn't seem to be who we signed up for. So, Dr. Martin, will you please come back to be the one that you were down there at Monterey, please? And also, you need to understand that HCCJC, is backed by the Lumina Foundation. They have it out for us. They want to, privatize education, and so please defend us. Don't go along with it. And since you're a financial expert, which is one of the reasons that we chose you, please don't just believe what Alameen tells you. You're a licensed investigator, so investigate the figures, find out the truth. And also, we understand that there's the fellow who was the interim chancellor has been hired at $25,000 a month to do I don't know what, and that there's some job listing for in the hundreds of thousands for some other vice chancellor, which we don't need. We don't need more vice chancellors. We don't need more administrators. I ask you to please cut all the administrators. Just you want to slash administrators, slash all the people that are making a lot of money. Don't slash any faculty. And I like, my questions are: is this a hard and set? Are you really serious that you want to cut 50 faculty, full-time faculty, which would mean cutting all the part-timers that are under them as well? or that are, that have to be slashed first? Is this a hard and fast decision, or is this just some sort of, I don't know what it is, because there's been so many promises already made to the faculty that there would be no more cuts. We can't stand more cuts. We're already at the bone, Dr. Martin. So, what, by the way, did you check into that one? I mean, the 100,000 that Amin tried to forgive to the developer, did you find out whatever happened to that? And did you ever phone the
30 seconds, Madam Tomasita.
first of all, what happened? Did you check the 100,000? And remember, that's just a sample of, just one example of malfeasance in the past. And also, what happened when you called the president of Skyline Community College? Have you fixed what are you going to do to fix the abysmal registration system? Because of course, that's why we don't have students. But could you answer what happened with the 100,000? And did you call the president of Skyline Community College? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for those questions, Tomasita. And I have not had a chance to connect yet with the president of Skyline Community College, but I will continue to do that. I have not had a chance to talk to that individual yet. In regards to the 100,000 or the Goff Street lease revenue, I believe that's what it's referring to. That was recorded in the district's books and records. We did receive, I believe, that 100,000. And it's part of the lease agreement that was signed back in 2015. And ultimately, that amount will increase if and when that Goff Street location ever gets developed. So in regards to the specific amount, that is the amount that's identified in the Goff Street lease agreement for the annual lease payment for the site in which no facility is built on yet. So we did collect that.
All right, thank you. I think that there's a follow-up question from Michael Lyon. Michael? Michael, you're muted. Michael?
Thank you. So, Chancellor, you spoke about a collective or collaborative examination of the budget figures in order to be able to make corrections. If in fact these budget figures aren't certain and subject to a correction, why are you proposing these ruinous layoffs beforehand?
So in looking at the upcoming year, we are putting together assumptions in regards to the budget regarding the state COLA, as well as STRS and pension obligations. Based on those assumptions, we are building next year's budget in a manner that keeps City College structurally stable and communicates and defines a path forward to where we are stopping the downward spiral, or what I've heard called the never-ending cycle of bad news. So what that looks like, in my opinion, is building a budget that has a foundational level of staffing that we know we can count on moving forward. And then if budget cycles or if economic factors increase and improve, we're able to add and grow where there's demand. So in looking at the budget development cycle and being maybe more direct, Michael, to your question, it's very difficult to project how much we'll spend on any one given item 2-3 years from now. So there has to be some sort of basis or understanding on how we assume or how do we forecast that type of expenditure. So that will be a part of these campus-wide discussions that we'll have here. The first one being on February 17th, where we'll walk through the methodology and we'll look at the numbers together and see where we're at.
All right,
But-
thank you, Dr. Martin. Jean would like to ask a follow-up question.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Dr. Martin. This budget issue is really complicated, as you've been hearing for the last half an hour. You just mentioned that there'll be a campus-wide process to go through this. Can you be a little more specific about that? Is there going to be a committee of administrators who will be presenting information? Or is there going to be a group of people in light of the participatory governance policy that City College has that will be involved, which means people from from various portions of the campus, students, faculty, staff, and administration? Could you be a little more specific about how this budgetary process is going to work?
Sure. So we do have, as you mentioned, Jean, we have governance groups that are established in our participatory governance structure. So we do have a budget committee, which is a collection of individuals from different constituent groups. We have our participatory governance council, or PGC. So both of those committees will be involved in the discussions of next year's budget. We're also hoping to have and are scheduled to have all campus and public forums regarding the budget and to take feedback, to answer questions, listen to input, and move the budget development cycle forward. So really, the budget development process is twofold. There's the committee structure through our governance system, but then we'll also have opportunities for the broader campus to participate in large forums throughout the spring semester.
So we're talking about this coming spring semester, and the whole process is going to take place in the spring semester. So by June of 22, there'll be a budget. I'm just wondering about the timing.
Yes, so we do have to get a tentative budget to our Board of Trustees on or before July 1st. So that is the end zone, or the deadline for the budget process. So between now and then, we will have several presentations and several campus forums and opportunities to participate in those discussions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Madeline and then Michael Lyon both have follow-up questions.
Again, the timing, all the department chairs, as you know, received our schedule for fall, and with the idea of getting it out sooner than later, has deep cuts. We can hardly schedule not knowing what faculty we have. So how is that going to interact with future, since we will have a very odd, if at all feasible, schedule? I mean, I don't see how it can be done. So how is the timing going to fit into decisions made after the 17th of February?
Sure. So, and I appreciate the question, Madeline. And in not being the resident expert in academic schedule, nuts and bolts development, I will try and articulate a response that makes sense. So in looking at where we stand today, the initial, or the foundational FTEF, went out to all the department chairs, which is kind of the baseline or the starting point. Between now and the timeline for schedule development, the March 15th process has to go through evaluation and review of the seniority list, the application of FSAs, the consideration of any retirements, the changes in staffing or demands or programmatic needs. So all of that will be part of the process as a normal schedule develops in the spring semester for the fall. And then the foundational level that the department chairs have now gives a starting point, but ultimately, as the March 15th process potentially plays out and growth is maybe identified and funding is identified for innovation, then we add to the instructional FTF as we go. But what was given to the department chairs right now is baseline foundational, to where there is no expectation that that number as it stands today will go down, but only go up as the process works its way out in the coming months.
But if I could say, in any practical sense, it ain't going to happen that way. I've done scheduling for many decades. You have to know the faculty expertise in the room. It's not, worker bees at an assembly line. And in some of the areas, it's just the scheduling won't be possible till the end of what you just described, which is a process. And but scheduling cannot be possible, not baseline scheduling. There's no such thing. It's post-secondary educational scheduling. And it is very, very tricky, especially in the CTE programs, as I'm sure you know, and some of the smaller areas, it's just going to be probably very difficult to get any meaningful schedule. And if you put out a schedule and then the students think that's it, and then it all changes because we finally do get the facts, that destroys the students' sense of stability and they don't come back. It's a tricky timing, just a cautionary comment.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I do recognize that there is flux, or there is uncertainty in the final number of FTF, and that makes it challenging to build the schedule at this point. And we have to get through, if we do fully go through the March 15th process, there are timelines and legal benchmarks that we need to hit, which ultimately makes the scheduling during this time more complicated. So very interesting.
All right, thank you, Dr. Martin. Jean has a follow-up question, as does Michael Lyon.
This is kind of in following up the point that Madeline raised, but now I'm even more confused. A decision to let 50 teachers go because there isn't enough money is going to be finalized before the 2022-2023 budget has been completed and approved. That kind of feels like the cart is being put before the horse. I don't understand how that timing works. Now, you may have answered the question, I might have missed it.
So in respects to the budget development and the schedule development, they are on parallel tracks. And Gina, if I'm being repetitive or off base, please just stop, jump in and redirect me. But in regards to this, the academic schedule of classes is our largest expense at City College and at any community college. We build the budget around the schedule of classes. So as the schedule is taking shape, the budget is moving forward on a parallel track with the schedule development. But in looking at where we stand today, we are, based on the assumptions we're using for our future budget development, expecting that in order to meet our budget needs, we will need 50 fewer full-time faculty within our staffing ranks by the end of next year.
But don't you need to do that full-blown budget process before you know how much money you have, before you can decide how many faculty you need and whether you need to let 50 people go? It just still feels like you're making this decision about letting faculty go based on a budget that hasn't yet been written.
And I appreciate those comments, Jean. And what makes it challenging is that the March 15th process is outlined by Education Code and needs to start this month. So ultimately, we aren't in a position, or no district would be in a position to build this budget all the way up to June 27th and then make a decision that starts July 1st. So the two tracks have to run parallel because we do need to have a 3-month discussion or timeline to get through the entirety of the March 15th process. So we don't have a legal choice in regards to starting that process at the end of the spring semester. We have to start it now.
The March 15th process is the process for eliminating these faculty positions. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
I mean, if that's the way the law works, there's something wrong with the law. And if you have to follow a law that makes no sense, then we have a bigger problem. But when I hear that we have to make budget decisions before we have a budget, I get confused. Maybe someone else has a better understanding of this.
Thank you, Jean. Harry has a follow-up question, then Fred, then Michael Lyon.
Yes, thank you, Chancellor. Maybe a two-part question. Last year, due to the givebacks by faculty, the trustees, I was informed by one of the department chairs, the trustees promised that such cuts would not recur. And I still have to verify that language. So what I want to say also, according to the John Alamean's budget previews, allocations for part-time faculty in 2022-23 went from 16 million down to 10 million, and that is huge. So how many part-time faculty will be laid off along with the 50 full-time faculty?
So if I may, Harry, and thank you for the questions. Unfortunately, I'm not able to speak to comments that may have been made at the board level in years past, as I wasn't here to be a part of those conversations, but I can speak to the part-time budget and the discussion of part-time faculty. So in looking at where we're at today, the budget that was developed for this year, after the allocation of all of the funding to our full-time faculty and our full-time classified staff, and looking at the budgetary needs for the instructional schedule, there was approximately 10 million of funds available for the part-time budget, or what we would call the 1300 budget series. Some of the budget aficionados may recognize that number, but that's the part-time budget that was built this year, about 10 million. That number is not enough to meet the needs of the college, to where we are through December have spent approximately 7.3 or 7.4 million of that $10 million budget just on one semester. So in recognizing that the spring semester does not have a significant decrease in classes, if any decrease at all, we are expecting to exceed the part-time spending budget by about $5 million. So the estimate based on a full semester and actual expenses, the $10 million budget for part-timers this year is low. It is not enough to cover the actual cost, which will be about 15 million, between 14 and 15 million when this year's all said and done. So that information is important in looking at moving forward, because that's really the foundation of how we should build our part-time budgets next year and then the following years, is looking at actual expenses and aligning our budget to those. So real quickly, and to follow up on the second part of the question, it's hard to determine how many part-timers will be impacted if this process moves forward. There's retirements, there's FSA process, there's seniority list. Those all will factor into what may become an ultimate final number in regards to part-time impact. But that is something that we are mindful of. That is something the department chairs will work with the faculty and with the administration on here in the coming weeks, when we continue to look at the numbers and build next year's schedule. So that is something that I think we'll have more information on once the processes start completing. So thank you for the question.
Can you verify that if a full-time faculty is laid off, that they have to lay off all the part-time faculty in that department before doing that? That's the rumor.
So yes, and maybe and making sure that I'm understanding the question correctly. So the March 15th process, as governed by law, prior to issuing a March 15th notice to a full-time faculty, we have to remove any part-time assignments before getting to the full-time assignment. So that is an accurate statement in regards to the March 15th process.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. We have a couple of more follow-up questions. So let's start with Fred, and then Michael Lyon, and then Rick.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Martin. Thanks for being here. I've never been clear on this March 15th process. Is it initial notices that go out to faculty on the 15th about possibly being laid off, and then they are laid off at a later date, if necessary? And does that later date happen before the budget that is arrived at has been put in place? Am I clear with the question?
Very, very much, Fred, and if I am unclear with the response, please let me know. And as we mentioned, we are following a process that's outlined by law. So on or before, I think a date in late February. So for City College, it would be the February 24th board meeting. We would need to have the authority to issue or to start the official process of the March 15th notices. So at this time in late February, we are at the point where we've identified 50 individuals and have initiated the process. Over the next 2 months, that process will play out through administrative law reviews, if necessary, FSA applications, seniority discussions, retirements. So those all play into what will be a 2-month process, which needs to conclude, I believe, on or before May 15th or shortly before that, which would then require a final authorization to enact the March 15th notices. So we're at the point in the process now where we are potentially going to issue them. And then after a 2-month process, we will, if we get to that point, enact them at that time. So that's when they would officially become enacted. On or before May 15th, give or take a week. I'm not, it's the first or second week in May.
So this is actually happening then before the school knows whether it possibly has the money to keep them in place.
In regards to the budget, so it depends. It looks at, so yes, it is before the June enacted budget at the statewide level.
And if there is more money there, do these people get hired back or?
So, and without knowing the specifics, because this is, as I mentioned, governed in law. So I do want to just share that I may not be using the specific terminology and would be more than happy to follow up on any specifics because I don't want to mislead or provide incorrect information. Is that if a faculty member receives a March 15th notice and then subsequent funding or subsequent assignments would become available, I do believe they would have a right to that assignment and would have the opportunity to come back in their position or in a position here at the district. So that is outlined specifically in law, and I can be more prepared on the details, you know, when I come back and have an opportunity to speak to it at that point if we get there.
The clarification.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. All right, Michael Lyon, and then Michael Adams, then Rick.
Yeah, mine isn't a question, it's an observation. And that is that this whole discussion about budgets assumes it's like the weather. We have no control over it. It just happens to us. And that, in fact, is not the case. And you're canceling, you're laying off faculty will result in lower enrollment, which will affect the budget. And so I think you need to take responsibility over your role in determining what the budget is going to be like. It's not just something that happens from the, it's not like the weather.
Thank you, Michael. Michael Adams, and then Rick.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Could I offer a simple question? Hopefully it's not too simple, but can you share any hypothetical situation where the pending layoffs would be reversed in the period, understanding that you have to alert people, there's a policy that requires them to be alerted until the layoffs are executed. But during that process, I'm hearing that the budget situation is still being refined, and So that's the question. Is there any scenario in mind with the reality framework that those layoffs could be reversed in full or in part?
Thank you for the question, Michael. And from a budgetary standpoint and looking at, the January budget proposal and current and future economic forecast, I do not see anything at this time that would indicate the potential to reverse or lower the number. But with that said, that is something that we will be in tune to. And if something does arrive, we will include that in any decision making. But to be very direct in regards to a fiscal outlook between now and June 30th, I do not suspect or see anything that would change the path in which we're recommending we move forward.
Thank you for that. And the factor of improving enrollment is a question in our minds as well, which is part of the foundation for the budget. And perhaps I have a question for that later. So I'll stay in line. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Rick?
Yeah.
And Madeline.
Okay, David, I want to say that a lot of people were excited about you being hired as chancellor because of your reputation for being honest and for having a background in accounting, so that you would be able to see through nonsense that many of us feel has been in the budget. I think you could take an alternative approach. Rather than issue layoffs based on projected budgets that are probably put together by Alameen, who has little credibility in most people's minds. Again, talk with the union about that. And rather than laying off people and risk losing more students, because the pattern has been you lay off faculty, you cut classes, and enrollment plunges even more so, especially if the registration system isn't fixed, there's not a printed schedule put out, and that results in less revenue. So then you get less revenue and you say, aha, we have to make more cuts. And I think it would be maybe courageous on your part to say, no, we are not going to continue that pattern that we've had the last 10 years, God damn it. We're slated to get more money from the state. I'm going to go up to the state and say, damn it, you have a huge budget surplus. You need to start funding public education. If they don't provide it, they don't provide it. And take another approach, which is no layoffs, because again, you told us the first time we met with you that you want to expand and grow the college. And I took that seriously. This layoffs and more cuts is not going to grow the college. So it's not doing what you said is one of your goals. And again, I think you could take another approach, disregard what Alameen is telling you, because I bet he's the one who's
30 seconds, Rick.
These negative budget scenarios. And a lot of that is just some of the nonsense he does by prepaying things, and take another approach. No layoffs. We're going to expand and offer even more classes and give some part-timers their classes back that have lost their jobs in the last couple of years. Some 300 have lost their jobs. And we're going to take a risk of growing the college rather than making more cuts. Last thing I'll say, many of the classes that will be cut are in like departments like biology that already have classes completely enrolled. So if you cut them, you're just removing more students from being able to take biology classes. So an alternative to the downsizing, which is what's been going on for 10 years.
Thank you, Rick. Madeline, and then Larry.
Can he respond to what I said?
Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
Thank you, Rick, for your comments. I do want to acknowledge that I heard them, and I appreciate the thought process of looking for alternatives. And I did hear those comments. So, and I wasn't sure if there was a specific question in there, Rick. If I missed it, please let me know. But I did hear your comments, and we'll appreciate that.
You're muted, Rick. Rick, you're muted.
Why make decisions based on flawed budget projections by Alameen and take a different approach instead of downsizing, but increasing enrollment, increasing class offerings, and drawing in more students by fixing the registration system and sending out a class schedule to people's households in San Francisco?
So in looking at the class schedule, that is something that's been coming up in different circles, and I do think we'll have an opportunity to revisit the concept of sending out class schedules. So I do want to acknowledge that the decision to not send out a class schedule has not been made yet, and recognizing that that needs to be examined through further discussion. Moving forward with the budget development process, as you mentioned, Rick, there are questions and concerns on our campus regarding the assumptions that are used in our budget. And those assumptions will be discussed widely and made available here in the coming weeks. And ultimately, we will talk through those together. And if there are concerns about the assumptions, and if there's concerns about the budget development, we'll have plenty of opportunities to express those concerns and work through them. So those are discussions that will happen.
All right, thank you, Dr. Martin. All right, we do have quite a few follow-up questions. Larry?
I'm next.
Oh, sorry, Madeline.
As I work through with other folks, not on this group, the FICMAT letter, there are plenty of things in there now that we find that were mistakes that will in fact show a bottom line to our budget, which is not the deficit that Alameen has presented. The OPEB area is completely wrongly stated. The FON area completely wrongly stated. And my little thing I want to point out is that the one thing they say correctly is if you're reducing the size of a college, all employees should proportionately, whatever, go down. There hasn't been a whiff about the administrative costs, which have increased and increased and increased. I will get that data to you very quickly. So, and I don't think they need March 15th letters as we've seen in the past. So I think there is flexibility that would affect the bottom line of not completing the 50 full-time faculty. I think there are other fiscal options. I think we have errors right now in what Alameen has presented, although it changes every time. And I hope to get those to you within the week. Okay.
Thank you, Madeline. And if I may just highlight some of the comments that you made in regards to different employee groups on our campus. And I do want to communicate that we are looking at our administrative staffing as well. And as you mentioned, there's not an official March 15th process because administrators here at City College are on one-year contracts. So there's some contractual things that we have to do. But to say that there will be one employee group that is not part of this discussion, in my opinion, is not accurate. We will look at and
no, I said not up to this point.
not up to.
But I'm sure they will be now.
We will look at the budget in its entirety across all employee groups here together in the coming weeks.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. All right, if I don't have this ordered correct, please feel free to say, oh no, I was next. Michael Adams, Stephen Brady. Oh, Larry, I'm sorry, Larry was next.
Yeah, Madeline, I'd like you to give Dr. Martin a brief history of when we had a chancellor who cut everything as far away from the students as possible. I forget his name, but I know you do.
Don Griffin, and this was 2012 up to 2012. I'm not going to give the long history, but I have it. But you're right, up to 2012. Don always said, let's be on the side of angels. And the angels were serve the students. And we were a very sparse and very successful and very crowded school. That was 2012 when he had to retire.
Thank you. All right.
But he cut the administrators and all the peripheral people and kept the teachers, as I recall.
And no consultants.
I think I'm next.
Thank you, Michael Adams. All right, Michael Adams. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Chancellor. We realize the clock is ticking on this meeting, so I'll try to be brief and leave room for others. At Monterey, you had a great reputation for being hands-on with a fairly sizable team of marketing and outreach activities. And what we learned was you were involved with podcasts, updated publications, television ads. radio ads, mailing materials, scheduling changes, and involving shared government. So it seemed like a very large commitment that it's everybody's business to improve enrollment, given the impact that enrollment has on the budget process. And the contrast at City College, where we just lost the one person we could identify as a marketing person, who, as you know, was instrumental in getting out the postcards. And some of us walked the streets with her product to do that. What can you tell us about growing enrollment and the juxtaposition with that having to do with laying off faculty? There seems to be a conflict between those two concepts, and your reputation is one about growing enrollment. Can you talk about your plans for that? We got one person in this very large school who was committed to the outreach, publication, enrollment. So I'll stop there.
Thank you for the question, Michael. And I just want to acknowledge your comments in regards to Rosie Zapata and her great work in our PIO office. She's done a wonderful job, and it's going to be big shoes to fill for our college. With that said, we do need to move forward. We will get that position filled as fast as possible, but also look at new and creative ways to do outreach. One of the things that I have put a focus on in the last several weeks is meeting with many of our local agencies in regards to CTE opportunities, in regards to connecting students or potential students with social services that are available in our city to help them be full-time or be able to take more units. So those are the types of connections I really am hoping to focus on, because leveraging and being partners with a lot of the city's agencies that are doing some of the similar work that we are, I think that is a great way to get our programs and our opportunities out into the community and the current workforce for opportunities for retraining and skill development. Another thing that we're going to be rolling out here this month, as we are hoping and do have a podcast scheduled. We look forward to getting that on a standard cycle, but not to, lift up the curtain on the suspense, but we are going to have a first podcast here in the next week, and it's going to be focused around our wonderful fashion department and the spring fashion show that it has been such a wild success, and it's an amazing example of the great student work and the great faculty we have. So having a podcast, learning more about the student fashion show and getting that podcast out into the community to pique the interest of individuals who may have a passion for fashion and clothing design. That's an example of something we hope to move forward with in the spring semester. So stay tuned for a full schedule of podcasts, but those are efforts, Michael, that we are working on, because I do want to acknowledge that marketing is simply not the responsibility of our faculty or any one group. Administration, management needs to be a part of that. We need to prioritize that, because it should not rest on the shoulders of our faculty to get students into their class. We need to do the best that we can to help amplify their good work to bring more students to the college. So thank you for your questions, Michael, and I look forward to the continued dialogue about new opportunities of how to reach new individuals in our community. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Martin. I want to tell the group we have about 3 minutes left in this meeting. And Stephen Brady has been waiting, and Laura, one of our students at CCSF, is waiting as well. So could we start with Stephen Brady, please, and then go to Laura?
Really quickly, David, what I want to know is why now, why this semester? Why can't we just wait? The unions are working really hard with other unions to get some real sources of funding through the city for the college, to give us the community college we really want and need in the city. if you could just maybe kick the can down the road or kick for touch and wait another year and give us a chance to really find this alternative funding for the school to fix the holes. Why do you have to do it now?
I appreciate the question, Stephen, and to be direct, in my opinion, we are at a point in our audited financial statements, I believe, would support this, where we cannot deficit spend. We are at the bare minimum level of reserves. And if we were to deficit spend, then we would be at a time with the accreditation visit in the next year to have a very poor outcome, which would have a negative impact, which we saw in 2012.
But we're coming out of COVID. We're coming out of all of these social and economic problems. This is the perfect time to say, listen, give us a break, ACCJC. We're just trying to recover from the pandemic here. And I think you've got a great argument there. Say, I'm a new chancellor. Give me a chance to turn things around and really see a full cycle of a year. I've only been here a couple of months. I don't think that it'll look really bad for them if they don't give you a decent chance to turn this thing around before you're going to cut the youngest and most energetic of our faculty, because they're the lowest on, it's going to be devastating to the college. And with them will go all of the part-timers, some of whom would make great full-time teachers. We're going to lose them, so.
Appreciate your comments, Stephen, and I do hear them, so thank you.
All right, I'd like to go to Laura, please, who's been patiently waiting. Laura, you're muted.
Yes, I know. I know that the chancellor has to go, and I just want to say, why don't you take a pay cut? If you're really concerned about the budget, take a pay cut. You make more money in a month than I make in a year. So take a pay cut. That's all.
All right, thank you, Laura.
If I may, just real quickly, I do have to run it, and thank you for the opportunity to once again engage. The first Friday of the month, and looking at a standing time, I don't know, and obviously I defer to your schedules, but real quickly, my schedule tends to fill up fast. So if next meeting or the first Friday of March would be a good time, I'd love to pencil that in or commit to that now. Obviously, please get back to me if more time is needed.
Thank you, Dr. Martin.